Today is sort of a follow-on to Memorial Days. We're privileged to have um, Pete Seel with us today. Pete was actually an Air Force combat photographer in the 1970-71 time frame. He was a member of the combat documentation unit of the 600th Photo Squadron. I was in the Air Force. You'd think it'd be easier for me to say that stuff, but based in Saigon, and he traveled to Southeast Asia, photographing all aspects of the Air Force operations in the air and on the ground. And he sent me a couple of his pictures, and one of those, he's climbing up the steps, getting into an F-100. Looks like to do some aerial photography. It sort of looked like the pilot photographs that we had taken in pilot school, climbing and standing on that ladder. He was a professor at the CSU School of Journalism in CSU, including television production, digital photography, new media technologies, and telecommunications. Sounds like right up the area for somebody that's an extraordinary photographer. And he's also presently active in wildlife and landscape photography. So, Pete, I'm going to let you take it away and explain what a combat photographer really did through photographs.
Okay, thank you, JD. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Dick Life. The presentation I'm giving today is one I gave 4 years ago to the Estes Park Aviation Club, and Dick Life asked me then to put together some of my photos from Vietnam in a presentation that I could show, and that ran about a little over an hour. So I had to cut about half of this out. So I was able to win it down. It's hard for professors to do that. I mean, we're so used to having 60, 90 minutes just to go. It's very tough for us to be able to cut our content down. But I had to just make some edits to be able to trim it down, focusing on my photography. My longer presentation talked about some of the other photographers. Larry Burroughs is the one I'm going to mention today, a remarkable photographer for Life magazine who covered the war over multiple years. And sadly, he was killed in a helicopter crash in Laos in 1971. So this is what I'm going to show today is many of my photos that I took while I was a combat photographer. And again, we're not doing, this is not mapping or doing recon photos. These are photographs that are photojournalistic in nature. My job involved going out in the country at different bases and taking photos and writing stories to go with them. So it wasn't just photography. We're also writing stories about the photos and doing captions for the photos. So that was kind of the nature of the job. And I was there, most people in Vietnam were there for 12 months. I was there for 18 months. If you agreed to extend your tour by 6 months, they gave you 4 weeks off, free leave, and a plane ticket anywhere in the world. So I took them up on the offer. Most people couldn't wait to get out of there. They had a calendar, they marked off 365 days and they were home. But I agreed to come back for 6 more months. And as I was flying a mission where almost into my life, I thought about, hope you had a good time on that leave because it's a heck of a price to pay for 4 weeks off. But it was worth it. It was great. So I'm going to share a screen now. I'm going to show you my PowerPoint and get this started. Okay, this is I just arrived in country. I have a brand new set of camis, brand new uniform, brand new helmet, brand new Nikon. So we did our photography with 35 millimeter Nikons and with Graflex cameras, which shot 120 millimeter film with 70 millimeter. And this is my ticket to ride. Basically, we were in combat documentation and we're given press cards, which are really crucial because we could take these and go to the in-country terminal at Tan Son Nhut and get on any plane anywhere in Vietnam. We just couldn't fly out of country. We were joking about wanting to go to Thailand for the weekend, but that was not acceptable. So this was the ticket we had to show. It said it asked whoever showed it to provide full cooperation. So we go to Da Nang, and I would go in and talk to the squadron commander and say, I'd like to fly with you for 2 or 3 missions. Would that be okay? And again, we've been through Martin Baker seat training, so we had ejection seat training. We've been trained on how to fly in a plane, how to take pictures in a plane. So they would often accommodate us by giving us permission to fly with them. And by the way, I retired about 1.5 years ago after teaching for 24 years at CSU, mainly doing photography, video, things I did while I was in the service. So here's Dick Life as a lieutenant commander. He was stationed in Saigon, and he came to our base operations at Tan Son Nhut. And a friend of mine took this picture of the two of us. But there's our squadron. It was all in trailers right behind the 7th Air Force headquarters at Tan Son Nhut. And Tan Son Nhut today is the main airport for Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City. And this is our unit, 600 Floater Squadron, Military Airlift Command, Aerospace Audio Visual Service. And we did all the photography throughout Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, and other points in Asia. So my job was basically an aerial combat photography. And the mission was to document everything that was happening, the Air Force was doing in Southeast Asia. And again, still photos. But we also had a motion picture unit, a ComDoc unit that did motion pictures. And this really began in World War II. They realized they needed to document the operations that were happening. So they had photographers actually fly on bombing missions over Germany during World War II and document what was happening. They did air-to-air photos. They did a lot of the footage you see in documentaries was shot by military photographers. Again, plane to plane, also of the crew people on those aircraft. So everything we did was released to news media. We would take photos, and sometimes we'd see our pictures in Time or Newsweek a week later, but there was never a personal credit. It just said USAF photo without a name. Today, out of to honor photographers, they will always put the photographer's name in. When a photo was posted in a magazine or publication or newspaper, they will credit the photographer. But back then, everything was just said USAF photo. So everything we shot, all the negatives and film footage were sent to the Air Force Archives in San Bernardino in California, and then they would forward the material onto the National Archives. So a lot of what we shot are in the National Archives. And it's interesting, every once in a while I'll pick up a book about the air war in Vietnam, and this is a photo I took of B-52s in Utapado in Thailand. And I was able to, we were pretty good at scrounging stuff, and I was able to scrounge a cherry picker that lifted me up above the tail, because the tail on a B-52 is like 8 stories high. So it got me up above the tail of the B-52, and I used a fisheye lens to take this really dramatic shot of the sunset at Utapao. This was taken in 1971. So the pictures we took sometimes will show up in places we don't expect. You'll pick up a book about Vietnam, about the air war, and we might see one of our photos in that book. So this was a picture that was actually in that history. The mission was preserving history. Part of it was PR, part of it was to tell the Air Force story to the public, but it was also about recording history. And that's why we see documentaries about Korea or World War II. We're looking at footage shot by combat photographers. Southeast Asia, this is documenting the air war. This is a F-4 Phantom from Da Nang flying on a bombing mission to the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I was flying in the backseat of another F-4. So we would take pictures, and there's an art to it. You had to know if you took a picture too far away from the canopy, you'd get your reflection. So the trick we learned was to actually hold the camera lens right up against the canopy, so there'd be no reflection. You'd be able to get a shot like this without any reflection of the instrument panel or yourself in the shot. So we got pretty good at this, and it was harder for motion picture photographers because you pull out of a dive and you're pulling all these G-forces, and your camera wants to just do this. So we left at beginners. They would go out and do some motion picture footage. We had a beautiful aerial shot. As they pulled out of the dive, the camera would start to drop down to the bottom of the frame. You learned how to be able to brace your camera, put your hand under it, hold the camera lens up to get the shot. So this was again, it's an F-4 Phantom II. The LA-346 designation is the tactical fighter wing based at Da Nang, and I shot color negative as well as slides as well as black and white. And this is a picture of that same plane dropping bombs. You can actually see the bombs falling away down here. The bombs are right here below the aircraft. And when they hit in the jungle, there was a massive secondary explosion, which means they hit a truck park, some kind of munitions. It could have been fuel, trucks in the jungle. So they hit it on target. And their forward air controllers were circling overhead that could tell us if they were landing on target. So this was hard because we were in the same dive as the aircraft that's dropping the bombs. And again, we're pulling 3 or 4 Gs at the point, and you had to literally brace the camera to keep the camera above the canopy. So there was an art to doing this. By the way, all the photos I'm showing you are on my website. You can go to Google my name, Peter B. Seel, and there's a link at the upper left for creative work. Click on that, you scroll down, you can see all these pictures. There are full captions with a lot more details if you're interested or you want to show these to somebody else. Again, they're at my website on Google and Peter B. Seel. So we either sat in the back seat behind the pilot, or In the case of an A-37, we sat side by side. OV-10 Broncos, reconnaissance planes, we sat side by side. And this is, again, I tried to get pilot photos with the other aircraft off the wing. And this is a Vietnamese pilot flying Vietnamese Air Force A-37. These were used as trainers by the U.S. Air Force back in the U.S., but the Vietnamese were flying them as fighter bomber aircraft during the war. And a funny story about this picture, we had taken off, and I had taken off my mask, and we're climbing to altitude, and I started to feel like, kind of woozy, getting tunnel vision. And the pilot looked over and said, "Put your mask on." I realized I didn't have my mask on. I wasn't getting enough air, and you could pass out if you weren't paying attention. But he was looking after me, making sure I put my mask on. It's hard to hold the camera against your face with a helmet on and a mask, but you learn to do that. So this is a picture of that same A-37 putting in an airstrike. You can see the bombs falling away from the aircraft. And this is near Ben Hoa, which is just north of Saigon. You can actually see in the ground below, you can see where they put in some napalm. See the ground is burned out here. This is where they put in some napalm strikes. Probably an active battle going on that dictated the use of these bombing missions. This is a dramatic photo. It wasn't taken by me. We had units in Thailand, every Air Force base in Thailand. There were 4 of them there, as I recall. And the 601st Photo Flight, Clayton Hurd shot this dramatic picture of an F-105. And they were called Thuds. They were very, very heavy fighter bomber aircraft. They're coming back, as you see, they're clean. There's no bombs visible. In the background, that's the Mekong River, which separated Thailand from Laos and Cambodia. So they were coming back to base from a mission either in Cambodia or in Laos. But a very dramatic shot, air-to-air shot. Cool, I like the fact that the aircraft he's in, his wing is showing, and the other F-105 just off their wing too. This is one of the more dramatic pictures I took. We were on that same mission we did on the bombing mission Ho Chi Minh Trail. We're coming back and flying over the South China Sea because it was safer out to sea. And my pilot said, "Would you like to fly inverted?" And there's a backstory. My dad was a bomber pilot in World War II. He flew the B-25 Mitchells in North Africa and Italy. And so I grew up flying with him. And so I love flying. This is, to me, one of the greatest things you can do is fly an airplane. But my pilot said, "Do you want to go invert?" I said, "Yes." So he flipped us upside down. And this picture was taken looking straight down at the F-4 below us. And the people in my squadron love this photo. They made giant, 4x6 posters of this. That's one of my favorite shots because it captures the beauty. The F-4 is a beautiful plane. I mean, it is a beautiful plane in terms of aerodynamics, but very dramatic, especially from above. So one of my favorite shots. This was taken at Da Nang, and these are F-4s returning from a mission, and they would fly over and they would peel off one by one, circle and land. What I liked about this shot is that there was a storm coming in, and actually it was coming in from the jungle out to sea, and as the storm came in, the dramatic sky, dramatic clouds. So it made for a really beautiful shot. So you look for beauty where you can find it, because there's a lot of ugliness going on in Vietnam at the time. Some pretty horrific things happening on the ground. So we try to find beauty wherever we can find it. An example of that is this is taken at Tan Son Nhut. Again, today it's the main airport for Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. But there was an F-4C squadron there that did reconnaissance. And this is when we would often go out in the evening just to take beautiful sunset shots to get pictures of the aircraft. And this is an F-4 just about to take off. One of my favorite shots was taken at night, and same squadron. You can see the windows on the aircraft here. This is a window here, window here. For the cameras they used, and I think at nighttime they would use infrared to be able to detect heat signatures on the ground. So this is night mission. It's tricky because we couldn't use a flash directly head on because you would blind the pilot right before he's about to take off. So they asked if we're doing any kind of flash pictures on the flight at night, we go around and put the flash on the side. So for this picture, I had my assistant off at the side, holding the flash to illuminate it from the side, while the crewman did use the light wands. It was probably a 1 or 2 second exposure to get the light wands to show up. One of my favorite pictures taken on the ground as a time exposure. This is the F-100 squadron taken at Phan Rang. They were based at Phan Rang. I believe in country we had 7 air bases at different places. So they were spread all over Vietnam so they could respond quickly. If a ground unit was in trouble, they could scramble some fighter bombers, to get up and provide support for them within 15 or 20 minutes of the call. So these are F-100s flying in formation over an ancient temple. There's a lot of ancient, beautiful temples throughout Vietnam. This is an ancient Cham temple. And for this, I had a radio, had somebody with me from the squadron with a radio, coordinating when the F-100s are going to fly over in formation. Because when this happens, you have literally a second to grab the shot because they're going so fast. This is taken pretty fast, probably 500th of a second to freeze the action. We went over to Utapao, which is on the southern coast of Thailand, because that's where the B-52s were operating. We flew out of Guam in the Pacific, and they also had B-52s based in Thailand. And this is a motion picture crew. They were set up with a tripod filming landings of B-52s as they came in. And we were not on the run, we were on the approach. But someone forgot to tell the pilots that we're going to be there. And they saw us on the approach, and they literally freaked out. And they called the base and said, "What is going on? There are people out on the runway." And then the air police came, and they were going to arrest us until they got the word that we had permission from the squadron commander to be there. So this is a great story. This is things are all, there's a really nasty expression. Things are all messed up as usual. But in this case, it was a matter of miscommunication. But I was using the fisheye lens of experiment. I took it because I knew that B-52 was a huge plane. And to get the whole plane in, you had to have some ultra-wide angle lens. So this is a fisheye lens on my Nikon. And I got this dramatic shot.
Oh.
I literally had to lay on my back as the B-52 came over. And this is quite an experience having an 8-engine bomber land just beyond you. But it makes it a very dramatic shot because it filled the frame in this fisheye, literally wingtip to wingtip. One of my favorite shots. And the other one was the one I took from the cherry picker looking down on the aircraft at sunset. So photographers in action. We had a category called photographers in action. We took pictures of other photographers as they're working. These pictures are of a Finney flight. Finney flight is your final mission in country before you rotate back to the States. They'd have a big reception for the crew. When they landed, they would have buckets of water, and they would literally hose them down with buckets of water. And sadly, my friend Paul Franklin got hosed a little bit as he's filming this, got a little too close. He got hosed down in the process of shooting this. But this is me right here taking the still that you see here of Paul and the crewman getting hosed down. Interesting shot. Jeff Minton thought it'd be interesting to get a picture of an F4. He was able to, have a ladder put up so he could climb up on top of the aircraft. Get a picture of the pilot, film the pilot as he's preparing for a mission. This is Vince Minkler. He was a motion picture photographer. They were using Airflex, or German 16mm movie cameras. They're much better than the old Bolexes they used in Korea in World War II. These were great cameras, phenomenal. You had a turret with their 3 different lenses you could rotate. So these were very handy, very lightweight, and used for motion picture photography. Here's my shot climbing into an F-100 at Phan Rang. I'm carrying a Graflex medium format camera, and they use 70mm film. That's the same aspect ratio, same film used in IMAX. So if you've seen an IMAX movie, the reason IMAX is so dramatic is that film is only 2¼ inches wide. And one roll of that, I could carry 70 shots on one magazine. And we use those for, air-to-air shots. So the key lesson I learned in Vietnam was focus on people, not places or things. I wish I had taken far more images of people, especially pilots. So, but this is a lesson I took away. I had great airplane shots, great beauty shots of aircraft missions, but I wish I had more people photos. So when I went to work as an academic, one thing I stressed was for my students, focus on people. If you're going to do a story about place, make sure you get the people involved. People like to see pictures of people. So this is something that I stress over and over again. Get pictures of people wherever you go, especially the closer the better. Robert Capa was a famous photographer who was killed in Southeast Asia. Capa said, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. So tip for you Rotarians, if you're taking photography, taking photographs, get close, fill the frame, get tight, because those are the most powerful pictures you can get. We tend to do most of our photos from back like this. No, get in close, either zoom in with your lens if you have a DSLR, or if you're using your phone, move in closer to get a better shot. So that's the key bit of photo advice for you folks today. So example, this was taken actually in Cambodia. And this is an army sergeant who looks like he's been on the field. He's got about a 3-day growth of beard. He was dusty and muddy, and one of my favorite shots because he is just there's a classic GI shot, and I'm really proud of that picture. This is a very poignant photo I took of a woman who was selling cigarettes in Saigon. And talk about a sad expression. I mean, her expression captured the war in Vietnam for me. This profound sadness. Perhaps she had lost, a family member in the war. She had maybe had to flee from her village for some reason. But this abject sadness to me captured kind of the milieu of the environment in Saigon during the war. I tried to get pictures of not just pilots, but also this is a ground crewman at Tan Son Nhut, and he was taking a break. If you look at his uniform, you realize he is not in uniform. So in Vietnam, people kind of didn't really pay attention to rules and regulations. He's got a boonie hat on, no shirt because it's really, really hot. You can imagine 100 degrees, 100% humidity, pretty miserable conditions. And he was just taking a break, smoking a cigarette outside the revetment where he was working on aircraft. But we had a joke. If you're out of uniform and you really weren't paying attention to regulations, we would say, what are you going to do? Send me to Vietnam? I'm in Vietnam. There's no place worse you can send me. So this is often a common reply to people when they say, I'll shave tomorrow. Don't worry about it. During the incursion in Cambodia, I got some pictures. This is actually an Army tanker. And I just loved his Captain America helmet and the sunglasses. And if you look at his glasses, you can actually see in the sunglasses, there's a helicopter taking off. There's a helicopter reflecting his glasses. So he is a tank driver. He's got his headset on. But I love the Captain America helmet. And so I got to take pictures of Army soldiers and Marines, different service members while we're in Vietnam. This is a really powerful photo. This man is actually an Air Force member of the Air Force. And his job was to unload the planes at Quai Son. If you remember Quai Son, that was the Marine base upcountry in northwestern Vietnam that was surrounded by the NVA. And they were being shelled literally 24/7 for weeks, months at a time. So we flew in, we spent 2 days there. We lived in bunkers underground because it was constantly being rocketed and there were constant assaults. But this guy's job was to go out and keep the runway repaired. He unloaded aircraft, but in mud and horrible conditions. The monsoon season, it would rain for 6 months and it would be hot, humid, and muddy. And this poor guy is out in the mud, unloading aircraft and helping repair the runway. And the next photo, this is taken a really dramatic combat photo. This is during an airborne assault. This is a Vietnamese helicopter. The Vietnamese were putting in airborne assault, and what they would do before they land, the minigunner would rake the landing zone with this minigun fire to suppress any ground troops. So their job was to suppress any ground troops before the helicopters landed to make sure that the soldiers could land safely. One of my favorite combat shots. So war is inherently ugly and fundamentally about death and destruction. I mean, it is. This is the heart of what war is about. This is a picture I took in Da Nang. This is during a rocket attack. I think it was done as in honor of our 4th of July because it occurred in the evening, middle of the night after the 4th of July, 1971. A rocket direct hit on the barracks about 2 over from where I was. I mean, there was a huge explosion. It really knocked me out of bed. But I grabbed my camera, had my camera. You always carry your camera with you everywhere. You never left your camera behind. So I ran out and got this dramatic shot of this barracks burning after it was hit by a direct rocket attack. And there's actually the Tactical Fighter Squadron has a database. They called Da Nang Rocket City because they just attacked over and over again. And an interesting story, I posted this photo on my website, as you can see it on my website. And I got an email from an airman who was in that barracks. He was blown out of the building by the explosion and survived, but sadly 5 of his comrades were killed, 38 wounded when this barracks was hit at Da Nang. If you're interested in combat photography, there is a really powerful book I recommend, and you can get it from the library here or Morgan Library. It's called Requiem. And sadly, to have your photos included in this book, you had to die in the war. So all the photographs in this book were taken by mainly correspondent photojournalists who were covering the war. So there were some combat photographers, but most of them were civilians who were covering the war for different news organizations. And one of the most famous was Life magazine photographer Larry Burroughs. His work is featured in this, and really powerful images. He went for helicopter flight with a Marine helicopter squadron and documented the whole mission. One of the best photo stories I've ever seen done. By my scale, he was the best of the best, one of the best photographers there. Sadly, he was killed in a helicopter crash in Cambodia. We got to go back to Vietnam in 2006. I'm keeping track of time. I got about 10 minutes, I think. Um, we went back to Vietnam in 2006 as part of Semester at Sea. It's a ship. Actually, the program is based here at CSU. Semester at Sea program is now based in Fort Collins. People say, wait a minute, Semester at Sea is based in Fort Collins? Where do you keep the ship? And we say, oh yeah, it's up at Horseshoes Reservoir. We parked the ship up there and we're not using it. But sorry, bad joke. Sorry, bad joke, Pete. Won't go there again. But when we landed in Saigon, there was a group of young women dressed traditionally. This is called as the ao dai. Their dresses, these beautiful dresses with these conical hats that they were wearing to greet the ship when we landed. So this is sailing up the Saigon River. This is on the ship, a view from the ship as we sail up the Saigon River. And what startled me was the high-rise skyline. I mean, when we were in Vietnam, the highest building was probably the Rex Hotel, which is 7 stories tall. But coming back, there were all these high-rises. We were just shocked. And there's another picture as we docked of a law professor and student on the ship with the high-rise behind it. So Vietnam is the most capitalistic socialist country I've ever seen. I mean, they have adopted Western businesses and manufacturing in a way that is pretty startling to see. So yeah, Vietnam is booming, and there are twice as many people there as there were when I was there during the war. And Vietnam as a country is booming economically. So during that visit in 2006, one of the things you do in Vietnam, if you're a tourist, they have a tour to the tunnels at Cu Chi. And this is the tunnels where the NBA and the BC had built an entire city underground and connected by these tunnels. The tunnels had mess halls, they had warehouses, they had everything you would need, like a military base underground that extended for over 5 miles. So very dramatic. And when we were given the chance to go climb through the tunnels, I thought, oh no, I'm not sure I want to do this. Again, I have claustrophobia. I much prefer to be in a plane, but crawling through tunnels underground was not pleasing. But I found when we got there, this is a picture of my son as we were about to go in the tunnels, and they've made the tunnels bigger for us Westerners. So they've enlarged the tunnels and overhead so they're bigger to crawl through. So you can see it wasn't claustrophobic at all. And they have these lights, they've lit them up. They're kind of like Christmas lights, so they're illuminated. We carried flashlights. It was remarkable to go through the tunnel complex, to crawl around. And for my son, it was really quite an adventure to see what it must have been like to live underground. And there were soldiers, in the NBA and BC who lived underground for 6-7 years until the war ended. During that visit, we went to a cemetery. It was a BC NVA cemetery. I saw this marker. It was very profound. It was a soldier who was killed during the Tet Offensive in 1968. And it not only had his name and his date, but they also had a picture. And I was just struck by how young he looked. And that's a thing in the film that they showed earlier, a very dramatic film about Memorial Day, that veterans inherently are young, especially our veterans. Their veterans are very young as well. But this particular marker in seeing the cemetery was very profound. And this is a picture of my son, PJ, at the wall in Washington. And he's hiding the name of Fred Neef. Fred was a photographer in our unit. And somebody was supposed to fly a mission with a C-123 cargo unit. And the one person didn't want to fly. So Fred volunteered to fly this mission with a C-123. And during that mission, the plane crashed. We're not sure if it was shot down or if it had mechanical problems or what, but it crashed 1 week shy of his 19th birthday. And his body was never recovered. There's a memorial to the crew in Arlington, but as far as I know, his body was never recovered. You can see how young he was. Again, just not even 19 years old at the time. During the visits, we made the second visit during semester C in 2017. We visited a wonderful guy. Juan Van Quang was a United Press International photographer based in Vietnam during the war. And wonderful guy. He invites the students and faculty come into his home, and he has all these albums, all these pictures he took as a UPI photographer during the war. And really a delightful guy. We enjoyed talking to him. His English wasn't great, but he was able to communicate to us with an interpreter. But a remarkable portfolio. because he was present at the fall of Saigon. So in 1975, the MDA actually were able to come into Saigon and to the grounds of the presidential palace. This picture is something that Hoang Van Quang took from the balcony of the presidential palace as the tanks were rolling into the grounds of the presidential palace. So he was present during the fall of Saigon. When they found out that he was a UPI photographer, he was arrested and sent to a re-education camp. So for 2 years, he was in a re-education camp where he had to go be re-educated about being a good socialist. So he is not very enamored of the current government in Vietnam. But today he makes a good living, at least he did till COVID, giving tours to veterans coming back to Vietnam. He drives them around the Saigon in his Jeep, showing them all these memorials that people remember. One of my favorite pictures from the return and visit in 2006 was after the tunnel visit. My son was walking back to the entrance of the tunnel complex, and a soldier, a Vietnamese soldier, put his arm around him. And to me, this is a profound picture of reconciliation. After all these years, that we can hopefully let bygones be bygones, and get to know each other better. And one of the most popular places to visit for Americans is Vietnam. Most veterans want to go back. They want to go back and visit the places that they remember during the war. So what I'm doing now is I'm really focusing on landscapes and bird photography, in addition to doing portraits. But this is taken in Yosemite Valley a couple months ago. So I love being outdoors. I love being retired. One of the favorite things is being outdoors and doing outdoor photography. So also bird photography. Bald eagles, we're lucky to have bald eagles present here in Colorado. They're a symbol of our nation, and they're the most regal birds, beautiful birds. So this is a picture I took of one at Warren Lake here in Fort Collins, taking off from a branch. And again, I use a really fast shutter speed. For bird photography, 1/1000th of a second, 1/2000th of a second, the fastest shutter speed you can get to be able to freeze the motion in their wings. And this is taken at Bar Lake. I got a dramatic shot of two bald eagles flying together. They're probably a pair, probably a couple. They flew out of one nest, and I was able to get a picture of the two of them in flight. Colorado, it's a photographer's paradise. I mean, think about it. We are blessed to live in this amazing place with amazing pictures available to us just literally outside our window, but also in nearby mountains. This is taken up on Shrine Pass above Vail. We're coming back, we're snowshoeing, and these are the huts. The 10th Mountain Division has a series of huts in Colorado. You may have stayed at some of them. These are the ones at Shrine Pass, and my group was on their way back, and I got this dramatic winter shot coming back. So I just have a couple of minutes left. Thanks for your attention to this. Any questions about the presentation?
Pete, I have a question. How were you able to retain these photographs once they shipped the original negatives and things off to the archives?
Well, I sent 2 to the Air Force, and I kept 1 for me. So 2 to them, 1 for me. And no, for in negatives, no problem. I would just have extra prints made. I have an extra contact sheet. So for negatives, I would just order extra. What you're seeing, my black and whites are copies made from my prints. So and some of the color ones they're copied from prints. But for slides, slides again, I would send 2 in. And we heard that the Air Force lost a lot of our photos, which freaked us out. The idea that somehow some of our pictures would have been lost that never made it to the archives. So in some cases, the only photos that we have of certain operations are the ones photographers kept. But in most cases, these are copies of photos. Again, I'd have the lab make 5 8x10s and actually make 6, and I'd keep one of the 8x10s. I have a whole portfolio of prints from Vietnam. So that's how I was able to keep those images.
Now, Pete, I have a question on your camera equipment. Did you purchase that yourself, or did the military buy that for you?
Oh, no, we had the best equipment going because the Air Force provided all of our gear for us. Now, for corresponding, if you were to go to Vietnam and want to be a war correspondent, some people did that. You had to provide all your own gear. But for us, the Air Force did that. And it was good because the conditions were horrible. I once encountered a Marine photographer washing his camera in a puddle. And I said, "What are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" He was using an underwater camera, a Nikonos, the only camera he could use in the field that could stand up to the conditions of being wet all the time. Yeah. So my camera had stopped growing inside my lenses. It's like a little hothouse. I had to throw the lenses away and get new lenses to replace those because they're pretty horrible conditions to work in. But the Air Force did a great job of supplying us with gear, pretty phenomenal.
Well, it's also interesting, and under those conditions, who did your developing?
Well, we had a whole lab. We had a complete lab there. The trailers that we had, maybe 15 trailers, probably 5 of them were devoted to photo labs. So we had labs that could process still photo film. They could also process motion picture film. So one thing that was complete, we were complete operation. We could do all the work there. Color slides, we couldn't process there. Color slides we sent to Hawaii, had them processed in Hawaii and sent back.
Thank you.
So Pete, my I don't know if you were on when I said that my dad was a boom operator in KC-135, and he flew missions in Vietnam from 1965 to 1967. And so I was curious, did you ever get any shots of the planes refueling in midair?
No. Most of our missions were out and back from bases in Vietnam, so there was no need to refuel. Even the B-52s could fly their missions from Thailand and there and back without refueling. But the one thing, I flew in almost every aircraft we had, except I never got to fly in a B-52. I never got to fly in a KC-135. Because I've heard that's pretty dramatic to be sitting, you lay next to the boom operator and you get this dramatic shot of this plane coming up underneath. Incredible in motion pictures, right? Have this aircraft come up underneath and hook in. So I never got to fly in a 135. That's one major regret.
Okay.
Pete, did you ever do any reconnaissance photography?
No. Everything we did was either, air to air, pictures of other aircraft, but they had a whole unit, specialized unit. There's a whole squadron at Saigon. That was their job to do recon photography. So no, that they had specialized, and their film was amazing. It's like reels, like 50 feet long, and the film was 12 inches wide. And then we had the special processing gear to process film like that. But again, remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? They discovered that it was all about their reconnaissance. U-2, they use U-2s, but they were using film and huge reels that are 12 inches wide. So massive reels of film.
Other questions? All right. Well, Pete, thank you so much for being with us today. Your pictures are incredible. It brings back a lot of memories as an Air Force brat, and also a lot of memories as during the time of that era. Thank you for your service. All of you who serve for your service, appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for your talk. Thanks.
I want to let you know that.
So thank you so much for the chance to talk with you folks. Again, if you want to see more details about the photos, just Google Peter B. Seel. You get my website at the upper left, click on create. There's a link to creative work and scroll down. There's a whole bunch of photos with complete captions. So if you want to see more, they're available on my website.
Well, thank you. On behalf of our club, we thank you. In your honor, we will be making as appreciation for being with us today, we'll be making a donation to the Book Trust. We sponsor Putnam Elementary, and where we're able to provide scholastic books for students there who otherwise generally don't have books to take home. So we're happy to do that in your honor.
Great, thank you.